Okay, good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to today's inaugural lecture. I'm Professor Veronica Mackay, and I'm the Acting Vice Principal for Teaching, Learning, Community Engagement, and Student Support. And it is my great honor and privilege today to officiate the inaugural lecture of Professor Koliswa Moropa, who's been a long-standing colleague, friend, and collaborator. I've had the pleasure of working with Prof. Moropa on 2 national projects, which were not mentioned in her CV today. And so I would like to mention them briefly. The first is the well-known South African School Workbook Project, which gave rise to more than 400 book titles, and which culminated in more than 600 million school books being delivered to all children in South African public schools. She also collaborated with the large-scale Karigudi National Literacy Campaign, which impacted on the lives of 4.5 million South African adults who became literate through that program. And so I know Prof. Koli Moropa very well, and I also know that her dean, Professor Masemola, will talk about all her other accolades. Colleagues and honored guests, I'm so excited that we can celebrate this special day with Prof. Moropa, even if online, and I'm delighted to welcome her today as our inaugurant. I also want to welcome the Executive Dean of the College of Human Sciences, Prof. Khomotso Masemola, the COD of her home department, which is the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages, Professor Mtloleni Nobo, and all the colleagues from across the university, welcome to you all. And a special warm UNISA welcome to Prof. Moropa's husband, Robert Moropa, former Director of Library Services at the University of Pretoria, and also their children. A special welcome to the Denga family, Professor Moropa's maternal and paternal family, welcome to you today. And welcome to the Emeritus Professor from NMU, Professor Henry Tieper, who was Professor Moropa's lecturer and mentor at Fort Hare. And also welcome to her peers, and these are language professionals who have joined us today from other universities, specifically from the Rhodes, the Walter Sisulu University, the University of Cape Town, Stellenbosch, and also the Nelson Mandela University. Colleagues, family, and friends, we are honored that you've all joined us as we celebrate this exceptional milestone in the life of an academic. While it's unfortunate that due to COVID, we need to do this online, it has also given us access to a much wider audience, including guests more broadly from across the country and across the world. Let me explain the procedure that we'll follow for this very first online inaugural lecture. I will firstly request the Executive Dean, Professor Masemola, to introduce the inaugurant, and thereafter he will request Professor Moropa to deliver her inaugural address. Following straight after her address, Professor Nobo, the head of the department, will give an immediate response to her presentation, and then I will close the proceedings. So let us begin by inviting the Executive Dean, Professor Masemola, to introduce the inaugurants.
Madam Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor McKay, the inaugurant, Professor Koliswa Moropa of the College of which I'm Dean, your family, Mr. Moropa, members of college management, and members of the broader university community, especially members of CHS, members of the SRC and the broader student body, and everybody who is here, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Koliswa Moropa, who has done extraordinary work in corpus linguistics to earn herself the prestigious position of being a full professor in the University of South Africa. May I just say that this inaugural address marks the highest zenith of an academic career. Tonight, the whole corpus of Professor Moropa's work that catapulted her into this position will be orally vindicated. But first, let me begin by reading out her illustrious CV that covers the most extraordinary parts of her academic career. Professor Koliswa Moropa studied at the University of Fort Hare, where she obtained the following degrees: the BA Honours in Linguistics and Literature, the MA in Oral and Traditional Literature. She furthered her studies at UNISA and obtained a diploma in tertiary education, DTE BA Honours in Linguistics Specialization in Translation Studies, and then proceeded to the DLIT at Phil in Linguistics with specialization in Translation Studies at UNISA. Her employment history is similarly long and illustrious. Professor Moropa joined UNISA in 1993 as a senior lecturer in the Department of African Languages. In 2008, she was transferred to the Department of Linguistics. She was appointed as chair of the Department of Linguistics from 2010 to the year 2016. In 2017, she served as tuition manager in the College of Human Sciences. She coordinated tuition and learner support activities, CSS help desk, community engagement, recognition of prior learning, and the mentorship program. In October 2018, she was seconded to the Department of Tuition Support and Facilitation of Learning within a portfolio of the Vice Principal Teaching and Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support, headed by Professor McKay, to lead the Language Unit 5 5-year strategic project, which carries the title Transformation, Building Capacity for South African Languages. This project is responsible for monitoring the implementation of the revised 2016 UNISA language policy. In terms of research, Professor Moropa's field of specialization are translation studies, focusing on corpus-based research, technical and literary translation, terminology, and lexicography. African languages, linguistics, in terms of morphology, phonetics and phonology, syntax that focuses on isiXhosa, isiZulu, and isiSwati. African languages literature, oral traditional prose and poetry, and history of the development of African languages with specific reference to in isiXhosa and isiZulu. With over 30 articles, may I repeat, over 30 articles in accredited journals, including book chapters and her latest publications on corpus-based research in translation studies and terminology development are listed as the following, where she is co-authored with Amanda Nokele, teaching the corpus-based model in a translator training program by Distance Mode, the book chapter, which appears in the book New Insights into Corpora in translation edited by D. Galego Hernandez, which was published by Cambridge in 2016. Also co-authored with Fezwe Shoba, Language and Terminology Development isiXhosa, a history book chapter, which is in a book edited by the top scholar Russell Kashula, with Pamela Maseko and H.E. Wolf as editors. Multilingualism and Intercultural Communication, a South African Perspective, which is published by Wits University Press in 2017. These were but snippets. Because there's so many more, I'll spend the entire evening reading the entire publication output that she has churned out so far. But let me move on, because at UNISA, we believe in a rounded professor, not just based on teaching and learning and research, but also in terms of leadership, mentorship, and skills transfer at UNISA. Professor Moropa has done the following to earn it. Professor Moropa served as discipline leader for translation studies for more than 10 years. She coordinated the honors program and managed a team of external markers associated with the program that offers more than 13 language combinations which comprise African and European languages. She also monitored the allocation of MND supervisors, and she supervises MND students in translation studies. In 2011, she was the task team leader for multilingual glossaries in tuition as UNISA implemented its 2010 revised language policy. In 2013, she initiated the International Translation Day Colloquium at UNISA, successfully so. Translators and translation scholars in honor of Saint Jerome, the first Bible translator, who is considered the patron saint of translators, and celebrate International Translation Day every 30 September globally. The event attracts about 100 attendees each year, and 7 to 8 papers are presented. In 2019, the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages hosted the 7th colloquium, and this was spearheaded by none other than Professor Moropa. Professor Moropa served in various committees, both at college and at Senate. She had presented CHS for 5 years in the Department of Arts and Culture advisory project for a BA degree with a major in language or linguistics. She served in the Africa Speaks Committee for 4 years. She also participated as a mentor in the structured CHS program for all of 8 years. She completed the first doctoral study in Southern Africa that combined English and an indigenous language using the corpus-based translation studies methodology. She later trained doctoral students in translation studies in the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages on corpus design and use of software. And to date, 3 doctoral students in translation studies using Para-Conc for data analysis have been completed. Congratulations. Service in professional bodies. She is a member of the following professional bodies: the International Association for Translation and Intercultural Studies, SA Translators Institute, Linguistic Society of South Africa, African Languages Association of Southern Africa. She's an associate editor of Southern African Linguistics and Applied Language Studies Journal. She served for 3 years as board member of international journal New Voices in Translation Studies. Recently, she has been appointed to serve as a member of the advisory committee that will assist in the National Department of Sport, Arts and Culture in establishing the Southern African Language Practitioners Council as per the 2014 Southern African Language Practitioners Council Act. In terms of community engagement, in 2015, the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages registered 2 community engagement projects linked to her field of specialization, that is skills training for editors and translators, and another one, become a language interpreter. In terms of community outreach, I move on. She has a passion for children's literature, and as part of community outreach efforts, Professor Koliswa Moropa translates literature books from English into Xhosa and vice versa. To cite a few examples, she translated over 45 children's books, such as the Walt Disney classic The Lion King and 101 Dalmatians. She also translated over 20 Bible story books from Afrikaans into Xhosa, which is published by Hewlett's Productions. In terms of adult literature, some of her translated works are Plays by Zakes Mda, in The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. In October 2021, the Italian Istituto Italiano di Cultura in South Africa will be celebrating Dante Alighieri's 700th anniversary. And Professor Moropa has been appointed as one of the translators in the project, as some of the most iconic cantos of the Inferno are translated into South African languages for this event. Her academic training at international level. In 2004, Professor Moropa attended and completed a short intensive course on text, discourse, and corpora in linguistics and related fields at Saarland University in Saarbrücken in Germany. In 2015, she attended a sketch engine training workshop, a Corpus tool, during the 4th International Conference on Corpus Use and Learning to Translate at the University of Alicante in Spain. She also presented a paper entitled Building Multilingual Parallel Corpus as a Resource for Translator Training, a case study at the University of South Africa. Having read out all of these wonderful accomplishments, I now request our inaugurant, Professor Koliswa Moropa, to deliver her inaugural address. Thank you.
Professor Veronica McKay, Acting Vice Principal, Teaching, Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support. Professor Khumutsu Masimula, Executive Dean of the College of Human Sciences. Professor Nathi Ngcobo, COD of the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. My topic for today is corpus construction, multilingual parallel corpus, and institutional resource for terminology development. This lecture gives an overview of the main topics considered when designing a corpus and tries to answer the question, why is it imperative for the University of South Africa to move towards corpus construction or compilation to promote language development and linguistic research? To set the context, the presentation begins by providing background information with regard to language policy for higher education 2002 or the revised version 2020, UNISA language policy 2010 and 2016, and the implementation plan, and it ends by pointing the institution towards the language policy 2020 that will be put into effect in 2022. Commenting on this important issue of language development, Alexander 2003 observes that, I quote, mere language planning cannot bring about the fundamental shifts in consciousness and in behavior, which are necessary to lift the indigenous languages of Africa to a different historical trajectory, unquote. Alexander finds it illogical to believe that it is possible to think of an African Renaissance without the development and intellectualization of the South African indigenous languages. He calls on higher education institutions to participate in facilitating and promoting the development of these languages in such a manner that they can be used in all official functions as formal academic languages in higher education institutions. Since 1994, language development has been one of the key priorities of the democratic South Africa. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Act 108 of 1996, brought about change with regard to the status of indigenous African languages, declaring 9 of them to be official. Section 6.1 of the Constitution stipulates that, I quote, the official languages of the Republic of South Africa are Sepedi, Sesotho, Setswana, Tshivenda, Xitsonga, Afrikaans, English, Siswati, isiNdebele, isiXhosa, and isiZulu, unquote. The education policies of the apartheid regime neglected these indigenous languages, recognizing only Afrikaans and English as official. The release of the National Plan for Higher Education in 2001 resulted in the radical transformation of the higher education system. Subsequent to the merger of universities and technikons, the demographic profile of students represented a multilingual and multicultural society. The new linguistically diverse environment had major implications for languages of teaching and learning. Before 1994, the education system in higher education was dominated by the use of English and Afrikaans as languages of science and academic research. The colonial bilingual education system marginalized all other indigenous languages, and therefore the technical scientific registers of these languages remained underdeveloped. A landmark in the commitment to language development and promotion of multilingualism in institutions of higher learning was the Language Policy for Higher Education 2002, with Section 6, which states, I quote, "The challenge facing higher education is to ensure the simultaneous development of multilingual environment in which all our languages are developed as academic or scientific languages, while at the same time ensuring that the existing languages of instruction do not serve as a barrier to access and success," unquote. The 2020 Language Policy Framework is a review of the 2002 Policy for Higher Education, and thus seeks to address the challenge of underdevelopment and underutilization of indigenous official South African languages in higher education, and at the same time sustaining the standard and utilization of languages that have already progressed. This policy framework declares that since the propagation of the language policy for higher education, little progress has been made in exploring and exploiting the potential role of indigenous African languages in facilitating access and success, as well as the intellectualization of these languages in higher education. The language policy for higher education requires higher education institutions to develop language policies together with implementation plans. Then the next few paragraphs outline the current situation at UNISA with reference to its language policy and its implementation. The Senate Language Committee, chaired by Vice Principal, Teaching and Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support, oversees language activities in the institution. The functions of the committee are: 1, to maintain and implement the language policy for the university, to monitor the incremental phased-in implementation of the language policy, and to advise Senate and Council on language-related policy matters. In compliance with the Language Policy for Higher Education 2002, UNISA adopted a language policy in 2006 and revised it in 2010, formulating a plan with activities and timeframes. A phase-in approach was adopted in the implementation plan, which was informed by factors such as costs and availability of resources. The policy required the Directorate of Language Services and academic departments across colleges to facilitate the development of multilingual glossaries or terminology lists in collaboration with terminologists and the Pan-South African Language Board. The main objective of the policy was to adhere to a policy of functional multilingualism. This meant that the purpose and context of communication, the availability of resources, and the target audience would determine the choice of languages. In order to accommodate linguistic diversity, the functional approach to language development at UNISA resulted in the Multilingual Glossary Survey that was commissioned by the Senate Language Committee in 2010 and conducted by the then Department of Information and Strategic Analysis called DISA. The survey focused on two pertinent issues, namely the language preference of students and the usefulness of multilingual glossaries, which were included in particular modules. Questionnaires were used as research techniques, and purposive sampling determined the population of participants. The findings showed that the majority of students favored a continued and improved compilation of glossaries for those students whose first language was not English. Two other projects that were steered by the 2010 revised UNISA language policy comprised: one, students' language attitudes, and two, African languages in teaching and learning, 2014 to 2016. The Senate Language Committee commissioned the strategic project of students' language attitudes. The Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages managed the project during my tenure as chair of department, and Professor Nathi Ngobo, the current COD, was the project leader. The specific aims of the project were threefold: to investigate which languages were preferred by UNISA students for communication as a media of instruction, to investigate how and why students were making particular choices regarding media of instruction, and also to make recommendations for the implementation of an informed, successful language policy at UNISA. Some of the recommendations which emerged from the findings of the qualitative research on the language attitudes and language preferences of UNISA students included the following: languages should be developed for academic purposes, and a parallel medium of instruction should be encouraged where possible. A phase-in approach to language policy implementation should be used. African languages should be used to facilitate and support learning. The use of African languages in the education system should be normalized in learner support. Examination question papers should be translated into various African languages wherever possible. The next project, African Languages in Teaching and Learning, 2014 to 2016, derived its mandate from the decision of the Senate Language Committee to have a number of first-year modules translated into all official South African languages. The project was first managed by the Directorate of Language Services and later transferred to the Directorate of Curriculum Development and Transformation. The project leader was Mrs. Ketwe Murray. Quality assurance mechanisms for the translation of study material were incorporated in the project workflow chart. As delineated in the paragraphs above, these projects were implemented in order to promote multilingualism and develop South African languages at UNISA. The Language Policy for Higher Education, the 2002 or the 2020 version, Section 37, states that the promotion of South African languages for use in higher education requires, amongst others, the development through translation of subject-specific texts, terminologies, glossaries, dictionaries, and other teaching and learning materials. The Department of Higher Education has to work closely with relevant government departments and entities to create or strengthen existing open source multidisciplinary terminology bank to be accessed and used as a teaching and learning resource by all higher education institutions. In 2016, in line with its vision, UNISA amended its language policy and in 2017 adopted the implementation plan entailing that as a national university, UNISA acknowledges that there are 11 official languages in South Africa and ensures that together with South African Sign Language, they enjoy parity of esteem and equitable treatment. And it also endeavors to support all the official languages of South Africa. To give effect to its transformation agenda, the university introduced a language unit in October 2018 as a 5-year strategic project called Transformation Building Capacity for South African Languages. The language unit, under my leadership, is responsible for monitoring the Senate-approved implementation plan of the UNISA language policy and ensures that all academic departments play an important role in the achievement of multilingual education and the development of official South African languages. As an African university in the service of humanity, shaping futures, UNISA commits to build capacity for all official South African languages. This is according to the current policy, UNISA Language Policy 2016, Section 4.1.6. The initiative of corpus construction as a resource for language development is thus one step towards fulfilling this obligation. As corpus linguistics underpins and inspires the corpus-based approach in research, the next section provides a brief outline of corpus linguistics and the English language corpus. Corpus linguistics can be defined as a branch of general linguistics that involves the analysis of large machine-readable corpora of running texts using a variety of software tools designed specifically for this purpose. Data are compiled and designed according to a set of principles and are examined by means of computer tools. The facts which are displayed about language are systematically organized in new descriptions of language behavior. According to Leach 1991, it was in 1959 that Randolph Quirk made known his plan to have a corpus of both spoken and written British English. This corpus became known as the Survey of English Usage, SEU, and predated modern computing. The corpus was recorded on reel-to-reel tapes, transcribed on paper, filed in cabinets, and indexed on paper cards. The SEU corpus is based in the Department of English Language and Literature at University College, London. This corpus is now known more widely as the London-led corpus, as it was the responsibility of co-workers in Lund, Sweden, to computerize the corpus. 34 of the spoken texts are published in book format as Vastic and Quirk 1980, and the corpus was used as the basis for the famous book entitled A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language in 1985. Shortly afterwards, Nelson Francis and Henry Kushera convened a group of linguists who supported corpus-based research at Brown University. They produced the Brown corpus that was regarded as the standard sample of printed American English for use with digital computers. In the 50-year period since the 1960s, research in corpus linguistics has grown tremendously, not only in the English-speaking world, but also throughout Europe. Granger 1998 states that English is the most analyzed language from a corpus linguistics perspective. At first, the 1 million words contained in the Brown and the Lancaster, Oslo, Bergen corpora were considered quite large enough for research purposes. Now they appear very small when compared to the 100 million words of the British National Corpus or the 450 million words of the Bank of English Corpus, which comprises a variety of diachronic, stylistic, and regional corpora. These large corpora have become widely recognized as being important sources of information, not only for lexicographic and terminological purposes, but also in many other types of linguistic studies, including the acquisition of knowledge for natural language processing systems. The British National Corpus is a monolingual corpus. Various online services offer the possibility of searching and exploring the BNC via different interfaces. Some of the most notable services include the following: Audio BNC, where you access the digital audio files for the spoken corpus; BNC Web at Lancaster University, where you need to register and sign up. And other interfaces are BYU BNC at Brigham Young University, and also phrases in English. Originally, the term corpus, plural corpora, meant any collection of writings in a processed or unprocessed form by a specific author, according to Baker 1995. With the growth of corpus linguistics, the definition has changed in three important ways. A corpus now means primarily a collection of texts held in machine-readable form and capable of being analyzed automatically or semi-automatically in a variety of ways. A corpus is no longer restricted to written texts, but it can include spoken texts. A corpus may include a number of texts from a variety of sources by many writers and speakers on a multitude of topics. What is important is that a corpus is assembled for a particular purpose and according to explicit design criteria in order to ensure that it is representative of the given area or sample of language for which it aims to account. In his classification, Sinclair, who was one of my tutors during the training in 2004 in Germany, distinguishes various types of corpus such as reference, monitor, parallel, and comparable corpora. But for the purposes of this talk, only the parallel corpus is defined. A parallel corpus is a collection of texts, each of which is translated into one or more other languages than the original. A parallel corpus can be bilingual, where it comprises original texts and their translated versions of the same source language. For example, in the South African context, it can be an English source text, the original text, translated into isiZulu, which becomes a target text, or it can be vice versa, from isiZulu as a source text into English and many other languages, English, Chivenda, and so on. It can be multilingual, where the corpus contains translations into several target languages of the same source language. For example, in our case here at UNISA, mainly we translate from English and then to the other languages. It may be Setswana, isiNdebele, Xitsonga. But what is key is that the text is translated into more than one language. For example, the welcome and opening address by the former UNISA Vice Chancellor, Professor Mandla Makhanya, at the 19th Annual Steve Biko Memorial Lecture on 14 September 2018 was translated from English into 10 official South African languages by the Directorate of Language Services and then it serves as an example of multilingual parallel texts. It is worth noting that a significant number of the former VC speeches have been translated from English into other official South African languages to make the texts accessible to all. In constructing corpora, copyright is crucial. According to Bowker and Pearson 2002, electronic texts are also subject to copyright, and it is a good idea to write and ask for permission to use a text and explain what you intend doing with the text, providing a sample of data displayed in a concordance. Bowker and Pearson believe that once the copyright holders understand why you plan to use their texts, they may be more willing to grant you permission to do so. In this case of the research that I am currently doing within the language unit, the copyright of the text belongs to UNISA. Then, as an introduction to the subject of corpus construction as an institutional resource, it is motivating to cite examples of higher education institutions in South Africa that have made progress in corpus building. I selected two universities, that is University of Pretoria and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, to find out the nature of their endeavors in corpora creation. University of Pretoria has built corpora in the Department of African Languages since the early 1990s. The project called the Pretoria Sesotho Salibua corpus, piloted with a corpus for Sesotho Salibua, and this has grown from 156,000 running words or tokens in 1990 to millions of words, and it's still growing. There is also another project between the African language departments of the University of Pretoria and Ghent University in Belgium that has generated large corpora for all official South African languages, with sizes averaging several million tokens per language. The University of KwaZulu-Natal, in line with its language policy and plan, has established a center specializing in designing an isiZulu national corpus. The goal is to develop an isiZulu national corpus and isiZulu term bank as key enablers in the development of human language technologies. The University of KwaZulu-Natal, through its University Language Development and Planning Office, has undertaken the development of programs and technologies for the study and use of isiZulu. These include the recently launched 20 million token isiZulu national corpus, an isiZulu term bank that provides isiZulu terminology for a variety of disciplines, an isiZulu spell checker software for writing and editing in isiZulu with interfaces in both isiZulu and English, and an electronic lexicon called Zulu Lexicon, which is compatible with Android and iOS systems. This is a monolingual corpus focusing on developing isiZulu as a language of teaching and learning at the university. The UNISA corpus discussed in this paper represents mainly language for special purposes, since the university has adopted a multilingual approach of producing glossaries as learning aids that can assist students who are not proficient in English to access specialized subject fields in their preferred language. Language for special purposes refers to language that is normally very formal in register with a highly specialized vocabulary. That is, vocabulary used by experts in a particular field, for example, chemistry, physics, computer science, agriculture, accounting, economics, law, and many others. Language for special purposes texts are restricted and precise, and typically feature, amongst others, an abundance of specialized terms. For example, Crystal 2010 makes the following points about the language of science. The large technical vocabulary is undoubtedly its most characteristic feature, reflecting the specialized subject matter of scientific domains of inquiry. Everyday words are too vague for many scientific purposes, so new ones have to be invented. This novel vocabulary is largely based on borrowings from Latin and Greek, not original English words or terms. And then regarding the English legal language, Crystal says the following. It is characterized by the use of Old and Middle English words, no longer in general usage, Latin words and phrases, including some that have become part of the language, common words with uncommon meaning, words derived from French, many now in general use. As stated by Aitchison, 1994, it is a fact that words used in English today were adopted or derived from foreign languages and have been anglicized to a degree that they no longer seem foreign. Language for special purposes, phrases, and terms are chiefly aimed at serving the communication needs of specialists. By contrast, language for general purposes is general in the sense that it is in common usage. Then, since the language unit is required to develop a language infrastructure for large-scale use at UNISA, the process of collating UNISA texts that have been translated from English into more than one South African official language has commenced. This includes source texts and target texts, and this is the first step in corpus compilation known as corpus design. The texts comprise tutorial material as well as master's and doctoral abstracts. The tutorial texts are grouped according to colleges, and the domains comprise education, economic and management sciences, accounting sciences, human sciences, law, agriculture and environmental studies, science, engineering and technology, as well as the subdisciplines within these. As the research progresses, other domains will be determined by the type of text the institution, As the research progresses, other domains will be determined by the type of text UNISA generates. For example, the domain for speeches by the former Vice Chancellor, policies such as the UNISA language policy, the 2016, which is already available in 11 languages, University Service Charter, and many others, can be grouped under the domain corporate. Selecting and collecting suitable texts for inclusion in the corpus, as well as obtaining corpus analysis tools, are crucial steps in corpus-based research. A corpus needs to be carefully compiled, and the quality of the investigation is directly related to the quality of the data. A corpus is not simply a collection of texts. The appropriate design for a corpus depends upon what it is meant to represent. What has been deposited into the corpus determines the outcome. As noted by Leach, 1998, paying proper attention to quality and design criteria always takes twice as long as one would think, and sometimes 10 times as much effort. Creating a corpus requires a number of researchers. For example, those responsible for selecting criteria of identifying texts to be included in a corpus, for collecting the texts, for grouping the texts according to the individual domains, medium, and time and size. Descriver and Prinsloo in 2000 sum up the process of corpus construction by identifying 3 steps, namely corpus design, text collection, and text encoding. Text encoding is when then you have a database already and then you upload the text there. The size of a corpus is described in terms of the size of individual texts. For a parallel corpus, for example, it is the size of the source text, the original text, and then the target text and the total number of words in the corpus. The project African Languages in Teaching and Learning 2014-2016 generated a corpus of multilingual parallel texts. The following slides illustrate how I combine in the research step 1, that is corpus design, as well as step 2, that is text collection. This slide is a table of translated modules in the project Teaching and Learning in African Languages 2014 to 2016 project. When we look at the table, we see the college, the modules received for translation, the completed modules, and the number of languages. I will just use one example. For instance, SEDU, the College of Education, there were 8 modules, and the first module there, ABT 1511, has been translated into 8 languages out of 10. Then ABT 1512 has been translated into 7 languages out of 10. And then the last one, ABT 1520, has been translated into 10 languages, so which means it is available in 11 languages. You can see also from the other colleges, like the College of Economic and Management Sciences, and also College of Accounting Sciences, College of Law, College of Agriculture and Environmental Studies, and College of Science, Engineering and Technology participated in this project. Then the next slide is where I show a sample of a domain. I selected education. That's what I do. I move now to the next step. Here, I selected the discipline or subdomain, namely adult education. The table indicates the names of the individual source texts, languages of translation, plus languages of incomplete translations. In the interim, the author of the source text is identified as the College of Education, instead of writing the names of the individual lecturers. And the translator is the Directorate of Language Services or Directorate of Curriculum Development and Transformation. Also, they, instead of having the list of the translators who were involved, because this information in the design phase is sufficient to assist the researcher responsible for collecting the texts to determine the relevant contact for sourcing additional data for the next stage, that is to search for the actual texts. The following table then is an example where I show the search for the actual text. The module is ABT 1515, called Planning and Administering ABET Classes and Projects. This module, the source text is 43,334,000, and then it has been translated into 9 languages. I'll just give few examples. For instance, if we look there, isiZulu and isiNdebele have been translated, and Sesotho. But then I just want to make a comment, a morphological comment, that, for instance, if you look at isiZulu and isiNdebele, the tokens are fewer as compared to Sesotho, because the Nguni languages write conjunctively, whereas the Sesotho languages writing is disjunctive. Besides the development of teaching and learning resources in various official languages, the UNISA Language Policy 2016, Section 4.3.4 also requires that I quote, "Every completed thesis or dissertation must have electronic abstracts available in the institutional repository in at least 3 official South African languages. The university will make resources available for the translation of abstracts after the examination has been completed." It is worth noting that 696 abstracts are available in translation. They have been translated by Directorate of Language Services between 2019 and 2020, mainly from English into other official languages of South Africa. With reference to the language of translation, it is the author, that is the author of the thesis, who selects the 2 languages of translation. The following table just enumerates the number of M&D abstracts per language, but more research still has to take place. The M&D abstracts completed dissertations and theses add to the language for special purposes, and it will be categorized according to language domains. The colleges, in partnership with the Directorate of Language Services, have made progress in this area, and the researcher will consult the UNISA library to access the text. Alexander, again, proposed the translation of M&D abstracts of completed dissertations and theses to increase the corpus of scientific language available in the official languages of South Africa as early as 2003 in his book, African Renaissance and the Use of African Languages in Tertiary Education. Then the next section just focuses briefly on the corpus analysis tools. The value of corpora as sources of data lies in their ability to be accessed using software tools. Text retrieval programs, commonly referred to as concordensers, are the most widely used linguistic software tools. The concordensers can count words, word partials, and sequences of words, and sort them in a variety of ways. They also provide information on how words combine with each other in the text. In addition, they can carry out comparisons of entities in 2 corpora and bring out statistically significant differences. Software tools such as wordsmith tools, Multi-Concord, Paraconc, Sketch Engine, and many others do carry out searches which the researchers could never hope to do those searches manually. The term extraction software can operate in a monolingual as well as a bilingual environment. To illustrate the application of a software, I selected Paraconc, the tool that I'm familiar with and which I've used in most of the research that I've conducted in this field. I've used a few screenshots, one from the Department of Development Studies tutorial letter, and other screenshots are from my previous research. I'll take you through this figure quickly. For instance, this is Paraconc. When you upload Paraconc in your laptop, that is the first screen that you come across. You can see on top there, it's Paraconc, and I named the corpus temporarily UNISA corpus. So what you can do there, you load your corpus files, those that you have already collated. If, for instance, I use the module that I've referred to where I already have the text, then I will have to upload it, and I can also view my corpus, and I can also create a workspace. And then before you upload the text, you have to save them as plain text. That is an example of a plain text. That is a Zulu tutorial letter. I converted it to a plain text. The processing of the files may take some time, and it is advisable to use the workspace option that we saw in Figure 1 to minimize the number of times that texts have to be uploaded. There is no real limit to the size of the corpus loaded. The corpus files appear to be loaded in the program, ready for searching, but in practice, Paraconc does not load the whole text, but switches chunks of text in and out of memory as one does the searches. This means that the program should theoretically be able to handle any size of a text. The next figure just shows a parallel text loaded in the workspace, and this is from my previous research, 2005 and 2017. And it can be noted there that it's English, South Africa, and then the other label there, it's Afrikaans, whereas the language is an African language, isiXhosa. The reason why the label is Afrikaans is because Paraconc does not have a list of the South African indigenous languages for now. Then, once the texts have been loaded on Paraconc, a word list of 2 parallel texts is created. If, for instance, you look again at the figure, we can take the first 2 texts, I can work on those 2, the English Pencil annual report, and then the isiXhosa Pencil report. I can work on 2 parallel texts at a time. The corpus frequency commands create a word list for the 2 parallel texts, and the results are displayed in 2 parallel windows. The word list may be arranged according to the order of frequency, or it can be arranged alphabetically. The word list gives an overall idea of what information can be searched for in the text, and it is very useful for the identification of terminology. This is an example of a word list. You can see there at the top, it says Paraconc alphabetical word list all. It means the entire text when it's all, but then that is just a screenshot. You can see in the English side that the article A appears most, it's about 146 counts. And you can see other words like access, it's been used 10 times and so on. Then it guides you as a researcher. But what is important is that you need to have the working knowledge of those languages to be able to understand what is going on in these word lists. Then why do I propose a corpus for terminology identification at UNISA, or terminology development? Prior to the dawn of a democratic South Africa, the Directorate of Language Services at UNISA built its capacity around English and Afrikaans. Anticipating a shift towards transformation, 2 African languages specialists, one in isiZulu and the other for Sesotho sa Leboa, were recruited in 2007 when the Department of African Languages was restructured. However, the capacity did not expand because demand for translation into these languages was minimal. The situation improved slightly when Senate took the decision that academic departments should develop multilingual glossaries. As mentioned earlier, the glossaries are intended to broaden the scope of understanding by affording the students the opportunity to learn the technical and scientific terms through their mother tongue. The key role players in the process are subject specialists, translators, quality assurers, or editors. The various stages in the process can be summed as follows. The process starts with the subject field experts, that is academics, who identify the subject from which the key concepts are extracted. After selecting the key concepts, definitions are provided in English as the source language. The end product is a monolingual glossary with an equivalent and concept description, which is later submitted to language services. The key concepts and the definitions are then translated into the selected languages, which in the past were mainly Afrikaans, isiZulu, and Sepedi. But I am happy to say, since the implementation of the 2016 language policy, multilingual glossaries can be available in all languages. The glossaries are either appended to the relevant study guide for access by students or uploaded to MyUNISA as additional resources. The step towards corpus building and use of software to query data will improve the process of identification of terms, both at monolingual and parallel platforms. By this I mean, for instance, you can take the source text English only and do your searches there for terminology if you want, before you move to parallel texts. Then when you want terminology either in Chivenda, then you take the English plus the Chivenda text in that particular field or subdomain, and then you do your searches. In dictionaries, information about frequency or generalization of use is not provided in a consistent manner, whereas such facts can be obtained somewhat more readily from parallel texts. As stated by Bauker, parallel corpora contain a range of terms wider than dictionaries, present terms in context, and they are more current than those in dictionaries. They allow translators to acquire both specialized conceptual and linguistic knowledge about terms, and as they are in electronic form, they can increase the scale and speed of a translator's research. Tubert 2005 concurs, pointing out that, I quote, "Many words in our ordinary language have unspecific meanings, which cannot be described without referring to the context in which they occur. But this is what dictionaries, due to their constraints in space, cannot do effectively. The meaning of words is created in texts. Texts render specialized status to terms. Since meaning is created in texts, it is fundamental to identify the context in which texts are produced and to describe the texts that constitute the corpus." Then the software Paraconch that I've briefly illustrated, combined with a suitable set of texts, can be used as a full context bilingual dictionary or as linked bilingual discourse of translation equivalences. The software can present the user with multiple instances of the search term, and then you find that that term can have different meanings depending on the context in which it has been used. Then the successful analysis of parallel texts depends on alignment. Alignment creates links between the source and the target text. In the alignment process, the texts are meshed at sentence level so that a sentence in the source text finds a corresponding sentence in the target text. So the last example from Paraconch, that, for instance, when you do now the analysis, remember at first your text has been saved as a plain text, and then you do the word list. Now you have to align your text, because without alignment, it will not be possible to search the parallel texts. This example is also from my previous research, but what is important, I would like to draw your attention to the drop-down menu on the right. The alignment process is very important for the successful operation of the software. If the sentences are not aligned properly, which often happens when you upload them on the system and you say align, it will do that, but you have to check. A menu of options allows the splitting and merging of sentences, of segments. For instance, in this figure, you will see that dropout menu where it says split, merge sentences, and so on. Then again, you must have knowledge of the languages. It will be impossible for you to do proper alignment without the knowledge of the other language. Maybe you can be proficient in English and then you work with another language, Chivenda, Xitsonga, but you must know the morphology as well as the syntax of that particular language. Parallel texts present terms in authentic contexts, allowing terminologists and translators to acquire both specialized conceptual and linguistic knowledge. Some of the advantages of extracting terms from a parallel corpus using software tools are being able to find the more direct semantic connection between texts, and it is the less complex process of finding equivalence. The extraction of terminology from parallel corpora, considering the different languages, I've made few examples of the different languages, especially the indigenous languages in South Africa, English Xitsonga, English Sepedi, and so on, is not only feasible but extremely useful, particularly in developing scientific technical vocabulary for the large-scale use within an institution like UNISA. These linguistic, cognitive, and communicative units are studied in context because it is in texts that they acquire their precise meaning and function. In addition, it is worthwhile to note that the researcher, that is the language specialist, like myself, or the researcher, when I'm doing this work, verifies the list of terms. History or research shows that the indigenous African languages are capable of drawing on their own resources and create the necessary terms from their own vocabulary. As I conclude, I would just like to highlight the following. It is the responsibility of the Language Unique Strategic Project to establish good language management practices and develop language infrastructure for large-scale use in the institution. The project African Languages in Teaching and Learning 2014 to 2016 is one source that has generated a corpus of multilingual texts which will feed into the digital resource database, which we hope the institution will create in due course for all South African languages. For instance, if we remember table 3 where we had the ABET module, that module is translated into 9 languages and it has produced 418,427 tokens. This means if all translated modules in the project are retrieved, a corpus of a few million tokens will be created by end of 2021. In fact, that is the target that I have in mind. Corpus-based linguistic research within the institution will transcend terminology development. That is, it won't be limited to terminology development as presented in this paper, because the corpus-based approach can be applied to empirical investigations in almost any discipline with its attendant linguistic challenges. For example, within sociolinguistics, corpus-based techniques allow investigations of dialect and register patterns that previously could not be addressed. Studies of style are also possible with corpus-based approaches. Individual authors or styles across historical periods can be investigated in a more comprehensive way than in the past. Corpus-based research is also applicable to educational linguistics. The results of large-scale studies are helpful in designing effective materials and activities for classroom and workplace training, allowing educators to help students with actual language use in different target settings. Within educational linguistics, the field of language testing, too, can benefit from results of corpus-based studies, designing tests which conform to the actual language that students will be using on a regular basis. The analysis of corpora provides information on usage and hence can lead to insights into the nature of grammar. The usage-based approach can be extended to cover translation by viewing usage in terms of connections between form and meaning in pairs of words in two languages. Electronic written corpus should serve as a tool for the development of South African languages, as the corpus instantly provides the researcher with a wealth of linguistic data. This is in line with the Language Policy Framework for Higher Education 2020, Section 25, that says, I quote, institutions are required to develop language plans and strategies, indicating mechanisms they will put in place to enhance the development and promotion of indigenous African languages as centers of research and scholarship, unquote. In general, corpora, written and spoken, are also means of preserving languages. Tubert 2005 writes, I quote, our languages have not just evolved. They have been molded by generations of writers, poets, speakers, and critics until they have become something to be proud of. We want to preserve them, unquote. This means by constructing corpora as a resource for linguistic research, UNISA will be acknowledging the authors of the texts as well as the language practitioners who translate, edit, and proofread the texts that circulate in society. UNISA is the only university in South Africa that in its transformation agenda has committed to build capacity for all official South African languages. Furthermore, it is the only university in South Africa that teaches all official South African languages, namely English, Afrikaans, and the 9 African languages, which are Sepedi, Sesotho, Setswana, Siswati, Tshivenda, Xitsonga, isiNdebele, isiXhosa, and isiZulu. In addition, UNISA has retained the Department of Linguistics that became the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages during my tenure in 2014 as COD, the modern languages being French, Portuguese, and Mandarin. Previously, the Department of Linguistics invested in Wordsmith Tools, a software program for data analysis. It obtained licenses for more than 10 users, comprising staff members and doctoral students in the department, and organized training sessions in which I participated as a doctoral student during that time. In addition, I was introduced to Paraconch at a translation studies workshop hosted by the Department of Linguistics during the same period. To reinforce language transformation within the institution, corpus construction and the use of software tools should be part of the agenda of language development for teaching, learning, and research. It is time for the institution to have its own corpus database and not rely on external resources. There are a number of free online analysis tools that can be used by researchers for pilot analysis. According to the Language Policy Framework for Higher Education 2020, Section 39, it says, institutions must establish or strengthen, if existing, centers for language development to undertake relevant research required with respect to each of the official languages. These centers must be encouraged to enter in collaborative programs with other relevant national language development bodies. When the University of South Africa establishes the language unit as the permanent structure in the near future, one believes that corpus construction will be a priority. With reference to the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages, my home department, that offers a translator training program, I would like to restate that knowing how to compile and analyze corpus is an essential element in modern translational competence and should therefore be part of the training of prospective professional language practitioners. Where possible, students at postgraduate level should be introduced to research that involves the utilization of software tools for the manipulation of data. The time has come for the College of Human Sciences to review its offerings in the language departments. The Language Policy Framework for Higher Education 2020, Section 28 states that, I quote, higher education institutions must assist in preparing sufficient language teachers, interpreters, translators, and other language practitioners to serve the needs of South Africa's multilingual society, unquote. The question we need to ask today is, are language professionals produced by UNISA sufficiently equipped? Sorry, let me repeat this. The question we need to ask today as UNISA is, are language professionals produced by UNISA sufficiently equipped for a career in any profession in which language plays a central role? I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Vice Principal, Prof. McKay, the Dean of Human Sciences, Prof. Masimula, Prof. Moropa, the inaugurant, the family, and the university community. The questions when and why are very much important when you address a central research question, what? Prof. Moropa has been able to do this diligently during her career as a researcher and as a scholar. As a result, we can see vividly her contribution in language development and corpus building in this country. Her research has also been cited not by only local scholars, but other researchers around the globe. She is part of this university, and this is important because this is a university with national, continental, and global impact. This means that her project is not only a national project, but a global project as well. Her role as a scholar has led to the promotion of language development, very crucial indeed. This is part of national imperative, and we support it. Prof. Moropa points to the late Dr. Alexander, and he indeed believed in the need for language development. He set a trend that as language development specialists, we all traversed after his departure. Emphasis on the constitutional rights of languages is highly acknowledged. This constitutes the inclusion of the previously marginalized indigenous languages. An emphasis also on the underdevelopment of indigenous languages in higher education is very important. As part of transformation, we need to use local languages in teaching and learning. This will make knowledge and information transfer seamless and therefore accessible to everyone, thus strengthening the democratic principle of language or linguistic rights. Sadly, as she reviews, there has been little progress in the implementation of the language policy and the intellectualization of languages in South Africa. However, models and practices that emanate from the research work of Prof. Moropa will indeed lead to persuasive academic cohesion that will lead to a better implementation of language policies and development in this country. Prof. Moropa mentioning of the crucial driving committee in language development, puts this university as a driving force in promoting multilingualism and the use of all languages in teaching and learning. This also shows compliance with the national policies of this country. Functional multilingualism has been highlighted as a major strategy in the promotion of multilingualism in South African universities. This allows the production human resource cohort that will be able to communicate information with ease and in the service of humanity. Prof. Moropa has also acknowledged projects that were done for UNISA, especially that which led to the implementation of the university's language policy. What is important is that in such a project, or in such projects, the stakeholders, including students, take part and play a significant role in the recommendations. What distinguishes Prof. Moropa from other colleagues in the field of translation studies is her practical work in corpus building that leads to language development. This approach is current and modern, and in this field of linguistics and translation studies, and it provides an objective perspective in the study of languages. Prof. Moropa also mentioned that UNISA is accordingly playing a major role also through her lead as an expert scholar in this regard. She is currently leading a language unit that came as a result of recommendations from the previous language policy and development projects. Her research has also led to pointers and identification of corpus development, and corpus can also lead to terminology development, hence the development of indigenous languages in this country. Therefore, it goes without saying that Prof. Moropa has played a significant and crucial role as a scholar and as a researcher. She therefore indeed deserves, beyond any doubt, to be accorded full professorship based on her significant contribution in the field of translation studies and her productive works as a prolific researcher. And she is one of the very few scholars or researchers that are qualified and have PhD in translation studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Moropa, for an exceptional inaugural address. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Council and the Senate, it is my honor to welcome Professor Moropa to the Professoriate of the University of South Africa. And as we learned today, she has made a significant contribution in the field of research, and she has been exceptional across teaching and learning, and specifically in her area of research with relation to corpus building. She's played a significant role in terms of academic citizenship, and specifically her role in driving the UNISA language policy through the Senate Language Committee. Professor Moropa, congratulations to you and to your family. It takes an entire family to produce a professor. Honored guests, under normal circumstances, I would have been able to invite you to congratulate Professor Moropa as she leaves the hall. However, I'm requesting that this evening or today you congratulate her on the chat in the sidebar on the Teams platform. I also would have wanted to have been able to invite you to a traditional party that we normally hold after the ceremony. However, today it is not possible, and I'm hoping that her family will have a very special ceremony at home, a dinner, and a gathering to celebrate tonight's exceptional achiever. Thank you all, and take care.